This episode is sponsored by Friskies, who would like to tell your cats hi. Now, if that didn't get your cat's attention, there is one thing that always does the trick. Just pour some Friskies crunchy food in the bowl and you'll hear those paws come running. Works every time. With so many Friskies choices, you can always bring your cats running from their secret napping spots. There's always more to explore. See for yourself at friskies.com or visit your local store.
The Judge Janine Pirro, Tunnel to Towers Foundation Sunday Morning Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Now here's John Solomon. He is an award-winning investigative journalist and the founder of Just the News. That's justthenews.com. This guy's worked at AP, Washington Post, The Hill, you name it. We worked together there as well at The Hill TV. Can't believe, John, that was 7 years ago that you were my boss and I was in a makeshift studio that actually looked pretty good on television.
You did. It was an amazing thing to watch come together, and you were one of our stars, no doubt about it.
Wow, thank you, sir. So, first question, I'm sure you know what it is exactly. Elon Musk, Donald Trump, something very weird happened here because I was at Mar-a-Lago for New Year's, for example, and I was at the president's table. And those two were chit-chatty like the whole night. And basically, and I don't know if you've ever been to a Mar-a-Lago party, but they are loud. I mean, you could only talk to the person directly next to you. It's not Arby's. Like you talk like, so who do you like in the game tonight? No, that doesn't happen. But he was talking to Elon like nonstop before the party and you're just like, wow, this seems to be like a real friendship. But then you always have in the back of your mind that, yeah, Trump at some point has problems with most people. But in this case, Trump, in my view, didn't do anything wrong in terms of Musk completely instigated this for days, and then Trump finally had to respond. But in the end, I mean, what do you think happened here? Because just the behavior is odd, and we'll all be speculating, but it's a radio show, so let's have at it.
Yeah, listen, this isn't much different than what our founding fathers used to do every so often. They'd get in a good brouhaha because they had strong passions about what needed to be done for our country. And I think right now, a lot of people in power looking at the status of the United States, they see enormous progress under Donald Trump. I mean, in record time, the border's been closed, and we're beginning to see better foreign policy have better effects in the world. But the issue of how do we manage a sprawling federal government that just keeps growing no matter who's in charge has become a matter of passion. As passionate as Adams and Jefferson probably were throwing slugs around in 250 years ago. I think at the end of the day, these are two friends that are going to kiss and make up soon. I think it's a temporary breach in their relationship, and it's driven by the passion that both men have for this country. Donald Trump is convinced he can get spending down, but he wants to get the tax cuts protected and done because without that, you have the largest tax cut increase. So he wants to get this bill done, and then he'll turn to cutting spending. Elon Musk thinks that this is too good an opportunity to not cut spending more after all the work he did in Doge. And so he's passionate about it. I think Musk just tried to needle the president. Eventually the president threw a shot back, and then then Elon went on a ex-tirade. But at the end of the day, they're calming down. They're talking like sensible guys, and they're two smart guys that I think will come back and find ways to work together to make this country better. We got a lot of crises. We got a China crisis. We've got a spending crisis. We've got a bond market crisis. These two guys are going to be at the center of the fix once they get over this little brouhaha.
And we're talking to John Solomon. You mentioned the China crisis. Just for those who don't follow it as closely, because they'll say, well, we're not at war with China per se. Yes, maybe we are over intellectual property or obviously tariffs going back and forth, even though those seem to be easing and maybe perhaps an agreement can come sometime this summer. But are we still in crisis with China?
We are. Just think about what we learned this week, that two Chinese scientists funded by our tax dollars. That's the most amazing thing that Just the News turned up. These scientists were working for a lab, and two more senior Chinese scientists on our show we're funding. What are we funding them to do? To study dangerous pathogens on our soil. What do? They smuggle in a pathogen that if it were to escape, like COVID escaped from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, could have wiped out large parts of our crops.
Wow.
Those are really dangerous things. China is using our money and our goodwill to develop biological weapons and to develop solutions to biological weapons, and we're paying for their extraordinary growth. We have treated China for the last 3 decades like a third world country. They get all the benefits of a third world country. They're an economic superpower on par with us. That's what Donald Trump blew the whistle on during the 2024 election. The relationship is starting to balance out. Donald Trump is making strides, but there are just simple things we can do. Someone has to stand up and say, right after COVID, after the fungus in Michigan, maybe it's a good time to stop funding Chinese scientists who are doing really dangerous work. And forget this communists and the natural battle between us. China just has a bad lab safety record. Historically, they're one of the worst countries when it comes to biosafety. It's just not a good investment for American people. Those are things we could fix in Congress tomorrow if we had the will.
I have the will, and that's the whole trick at this point. I mean, we're talking to John Solomon. Apparently China basically blew off Joe Biden when whoever's running the country when he was in office. Where as far as like collecting on tariffs, they're like, yeah, we're not going to pay it, and they didn't even like bother to like even try. So certainly good to see we're going in that direction, at least in challenging China. And John, I want to talk about this story that I find remarkable, the fact that the state of Oregon has a ban on most kinds of, quoting, unannounced audiovisual recordings. This is in justthenews.com today. And well, isn't that kind of what reporting is all about? That if you're Project Veritas, for example, and you're James O'Keefe, and you could get somebody on camera to say something that's damning, that's good reporting, right? So
that's right.
Explain what's going on here, how a state can just say, no, you can't do that anymore.
We are seeing the Democratic establishment now fully embrace the censorship mentality that they tried to start through NGOs and through federal agencies like CISA, the State Department, 7-8 years ago. This is a form of censorship. Conservatives have traditionally been better at this sort of undercover journalism, made famous by James O'Keefe. And so rather than fix the problems that you get caught saying on tape, we'll just censor the ability for you to catch it on tape. It's antithetical to everything that is at the heart of our founding of this country, of the First Amendment. The First Amendment was first for a reason, because without speech, we wouldn't be able to contest our government. You are seeing all across the world, and Oregon looks a lot like Canada, and it looks a lot like Great Britain right now, where legislators and executive orders are being used to impose suppression of free speech, free expression in countries that were built on that notion. All of Western Europe was built on that notion. Today, the Soviet Republic of Hungary is far more free to speak than people in Great Britain. I think Oregon is part of that movement. Now, we've made some great strides in the United States, pushing back on it. Many states have done it. Donald Trump has taken a blowtorch to it, and Marco Rubio has, and ending the funding, and Mike Benz, the great founder of the Foundation for Freedom Online. But this mentality still is spreading across the world, and if you got a blue state like Oregon, rather than fix their problems that embarrass them on tape, they'd rather just censor the journalists.
It's just amazing. And we're talking to John Solomon. I wonder, John, if Project Veritas was not a right-leaning organization, we'll call it that, right? Let's say it was more like Media Matters, right? Just total to the left and wants to take out as many conservatives or as many people, in my case, on Fox as possible, our case. So would you think that these rulings would go this way as far as Oregon?
Nope.
If they were doing the work of the left to take down the right, then suddenly that would be okay, right?
It would be just fine. That is the mentality. Do what it takes to win. I mean, the truth of the matter is, people say this is a principled argument. The liberals just think different. They're just trying to gain an upper hand in the effort to retain power. This is a battle over power. And if you can suppress speech, you have an advantage of power. If you can change the election rules to your advantage, you have an advantage to retaining in power. And these are the things that are going on. I think at the end of the day, as our reporter wrote it, this case is on a crash course to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has been extraordinarily friendly to free expression, and this particular court has been. And I think that when it gets to the court, some version of this will be rolled back. I mean, there may be some privacy issues on private property, but I think on public property, this is not going to stand.
And that's the thing. Most of the time, Project Veritas, these recordings are done in a restaurant, usually over drinks when people tend to have some liquid courage and talk a little more than they would. So, that's right. Yeah, that's the big difference.
Liquid courage is definitely a key ingredient.
I've always wanted to own a boat. I can't afford it, but if I could, I absolutely would name it Liquid Courage. I think that's like the greatest name for a boat ever.
Perfect name.
Right? Or Off the Hook. Yeah, it's one of those two. I'm working on it, but it's all in my head, unfortunately, right now. We're talking to John Solomon.
You Captain Concha. That'll be a good moment.
Yes, like Captain Stuving, but different. Oh, that would be awesome. JustTheNews.com. And today's edition particularly has a lot of great stories, including from your reporter, Harley Lipman, who is reporting now that the Muslim Brotherhood is spending not millions, but billions of dollars pushing anti-Semitism at Ivy League campuses like Columbia University, for example. I'm not terribly surprised by this in terms of the intent, but the amount, John, is just overwhelming.
Yeah, we last year we had a story. I think it was about $5 or $6 billion just coming in from Qatar to American universities. Now, a lot of that money goes to support campuses overseas. So there's an American campus on Qatar, and so a lot of that money goes to put that sort of show university on their soil. I have a funny feeling. I have a prediction that this relationship between Qatar and American universities is about to fray. It isn't just because of the bad publicity or the anti-Semitism issue, which is a very real and deep issue in America, but our very leftist students are now going to Qatar and preaching values that the Qatari society doesn't appreciate. And I think you're going to see an amazing explosion in the next few months where Qatar maybe says, you know what? We're done funding American universities because we didn't mind if you kept that crap on your side of but you bring it in our country. It's offensive. I think you're going to see a blowback. I've been doing some reporting on this, and I think that moment's ahead of us. But in the meantime, you're right. These students that come over, they bring, and the exchange students, they bring this anti-Semitism here. They become protesters on campus, as we saw. Some of the people that Donald Trump want to do this. And we've created a perfect storm. We taught DEI for a long time in the universities, which is sort of the first notion that skin and race are dividers among us. And then we bring in students who bring this mentality from the Middle East of hating Israel. And we've created a powder keg in our universities, and it's foreign influence that actually has been throwing the kerosene on that fire.
And the Trump administration has been obviously very aggressive, particularly with Harvard.
Huge.
Yes, as far as funding in the endowments. And, they're certainly putting them on the offensive, of course, battling the courts as they seem to always do. That this is a story where, again, Donald Trump seems to understand the cultural aspect of all of this, that Jewish students are afraid to go to class, or the anti-Semitism is rampant. And this is something that obviously I would think most common sense Americans agree with, and common sense that appears to be back in style in Washington, D.C. We're talking to John Solomon. Speaking of common sense, John, so this story always really rankles my wife because she is an ER doctor, right? But to be an ER doctor, she had to go to Georgetown. To go to Georgetown, she had to earn a scholarship because her dad had, unfortunately, like a massive heart attack when he was in his 30s, and he worked for like printing presses, so he couldn't work the way he could before because he just didn't have the heart, not obviously symbolically, but literally like the heart to do the heavy lifting. So he had to do a bunch of odd jobs. The reason why I bring all this up, right? She grows up in a house with 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. 3 sisters and a mother, and then the dad had to share 1 bathroom with 4 girls. So I always praised him.
That poor guy.
Could you imagine? Poor Bill Reedy, right? But the reason why I bring all this up is that she ran in high school and did so well that she got a full track scholarship to Georgetown, right?
Wow.
Which, incredible. She was number 3 in the country at one point. I know. And I tried racing her once. She's a gazelle. It did not go well for me, believe me. But she's not really political, right? Or she wasn't anyway. But then once the Leah Thomas story broke, University of Pennsylvania, this guy who was ranked 500 and something in swimming suddenly is winning national championships against other women. I've never seen her get that passionate about something before, because she would say, you don't know how hard it is to get to this level. And then I look down the blocks and I see someone who looks like Saquon Barkley down there with those kind of legs. I know I'm going to lose, right? I can train all I want. So I see, now again, like in Minnesota, for example, it's always the most progressive states, California, Minnesota, you read these stories where, a female softball player was injured by a male pitcher, and now she's suing Minnesota to keep males out of her games. Is that the pendulum really seems to be switching here, where women are not going up on podiums with men who beat them anymore, or legal action. I think that's the way ultimately that this thing's going to go away, that you hit them where it hurts, sue the states that are allowing this to happen, because someone's going to get killed eventually.
That's the danger here. And listen, you're starting to see even other countries get ahead of us on some of these issues. That's a good thing. But Donald Trump has made this a very successful issue in the campaign. The American people are 80% in favor on this issue. It is a winning issue because it's a common sense issue. It's a safety issue. It's a fairness issue. I think the boiling point, the final flashpoint, will come on our soil in 2028 when we host the Olympics in Los Angeles, because on American soil, the Olympic Committee may try to force Americans to compete against someone of the opposite gender. That's going to become an extraordinary moment. I think we're moving where this country is going to be clearly entrenched in a position. But the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles could be a fascinating cultural moment for the world, and how that plays out could really define how this issue spreads across the world. We are always a leader on these issues. Usually we are. And I think how we ultimately resolve this in our country could set a standard for many others to follow suit, to have the courage to do what we're doing, which is just be common sense. We're not discriminating against transgender people, but you can't be a man and just say, I want to compete against women. That's just not how it works.
So, John, you've worked for the Associated Press, the Washington Post, The Hill, we talked about before, and those were all, I don't want to call it corporate entities, but they were your legacy standard types of places, right? Where, you have a hierarchy. In some cases, they're publicly traded companies like the Washington Post, for example. But overall, it's now a different landscape completely, where I just see more and more people leaving places like the Washington Post, like the Associated Press, like so many Politico, Axios, and just they don't need a big studio anymore, and they don't need a staff even. Tara Palmieri is one example that's coming to my head right now, where all she needs is her laptop and a decent camera, and then from there she could do interviews over Zoom, and they get millions of views. So I mean. With Just the News, I know that obviously you have a huge staff as far as reporters and editors and so on, but you could be a lot more nimble now, can't you?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, I serve. We have about 12 million readers, viewers, and listeners a month. And 20 years ago, that would have taken a staff of 100 people to generate that level, and I can do that with 20 people now. The era we live in is so incredibly liberating for journalism, and it was an extraordinary moment to see so many people like a Barry Weiss, like me, Matt Taibbi, just leave legacy journalism because they became frustrated. You couldn't do news anymore. You were forced to follow the conventions, even if it wasn't true. There was a pressure to follow the conventional storyline, and if it wasn't true, you were castigated for continuing to pursue it. And so people just said, I'm out. And, oh, by the way, with social media and small cameras and new digital platforms, I can be in business tomorrow. I don't need to raise capital money. I can just go. And it has created one of the great competition moments in American history. And today, new media reaches nearly as much as legacy media. When you look at the overall reach numbers, new media as a combined force reach about the same now. They're having a profound influence. We're not just showing up and having a spot in the White House Correspondents Association like we did this week, but we can go toe-to-toe and break stories ahead of the New York Times. And there's many times now where the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or CBS News ends up crediting a new media outlet because they got scooped by it. And I think that's a great moment. When we became frustrated with the state of journalism a decade ago, I guess it would be about, was sort of the moment where it began boiling. Our founding fathers had this great idea. We have a free marketplace. Competition can solve anything. So people just created a competitive landscape, and I think America's better for it. And also Americans are more astute. They don't just read one or two things. They read 4 or 5 things, and they try to get a 360-degree view, and they're smarter, and they're more satisfied for it.
John, unfortunately, they're giving me the wave behind the glass, so to speak, so I will have to leave you. But thanks again for joining us. We covered a whole bunch of topics, and again, congratulations on
everything you do, Joe. So great work.
Oh, man, thanks so much. It's the great John Solomon, everyone. And back with more on the Judge Jeanine Tunnel to Towers show in just a moment.